Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you all to today's webinar focused on the Carbon Reduction Program Solicitation for Fiscal Year 2023. My name is Tim Olusegun, and I am the Section Supervisor for WisDOT Local Program and Finance. Today, we've got a short presentation here, and we will be providing answers to some frequently asked questions. And before I get started, I want to say thank you for working collaboratively together with us regarding our prior solicitations. Joining me here today in this presentation is Chris Brooks, our BIL coordinator, as well as Meryl McClaw-Exing, the local program section chief. So let's get started. Next slide, please. In this presentation, we're going to be providing information majorly on these following topics. Number one, what is BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law? Then secondly, what is the Carbon Reduction Program? Then how to apply for this program. And lastly, we're going to be providing useful additional resources regarding this program. Next slide, please. By now, most folks here have probably heard a lot about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which was signed in November 2021. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law represents a historic increase in the federal funding available for local programs over the next 5 fiscal years. This provides significant increases in the federally funded local programs, such as the Surface Transportation Block Grant, the STBG, and also the Carbon Reduction Program that we are talking about today, and also the Bridge Formula Program, Transportation Alternative Program, TAP, and the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program, CMAQ. Next slide, please. Even though the BIL is federally funded, in Wisconsin, we must follow the directive of the state legislature when there is a change in the federal funding that exceeds 5%. In this case, the department is required to submit a new federal expenditure to the Wisconsin Joint Committee on Finance. The Joint Committee on Finance can approve the submitted plan or approve with amendment or reject the plans. This federal plan requirement is a factor when developing our response to the BIL solicitation rollout. Next slide, please. The 2023 Wisconsin Fed Plan specified that $15.5 million may only be used for eligible projects to replace street lighting and traffic control devices with energy-efficient alternatives, and can only be used for projects to deploy advanced transportation and congestion management technologies or right-of-way improvement projects to improve traffic flow that did not involve construction of new capacity. So next, I'm going to turn things over to Chris Brooks, who is going to provide more information specifically for the Carbon Reduction Program. Take it away, Chris.
Thank you for that, Tim. Appreciate the introduction. My name is Chris Brooks. I'm the BIL Implementation Specialist here at WisDOT Central Office and also the Carbon Reduction Statewide Local Program Manager. So I'll be giving you a further introduction into the Carbon Reduction Program. So as Tim mentioned, the BIL authorized a lot of funding increases across the board and some new programs, including the carbon reduction program. The carbon reduction program is specifically focused on reducing carbon CO2 emissions. Other programs such as CMAQ, which you might be familiar with, are focused on particulate matter pollution, but this one is specifically for carbon reduction. And while this program was available to be spent statewide, WisDOT decided that it would be the best plan to put this in the hands of local governments and focus it on the local areas. Next slide, please. So the funding availability for 23, again, as Tim mentioned previously, we have $15,573,100 to spend in state fiscal 2023 on the carbon reduction program. Like some BIL programs, this has been broken down by population area. In the case of carbon reduction, we have roughly 6 million in areas greater than 200,000. We have 2.5 million in 200 to 50,000, about 1.8 million in 50 to 5,000, and about 5 million in areas under 5,000 in population. Next slide, please. So one of the big things that's been discussed is prior fiscal year applications from 2022. As many of you are aware, the department did hold a solicitation for carbon reduction last year in 2022, which ultimately needed to be delayed. WisDOT will be considering the applications that were received in 2022 for the current 2023 solicitation. In order to incorporate these applications, we'll be using a flex agreement, which we have used previously for the Surface Transportation Program. Flex agreements have been posted and we'll be discussing them on the next slide. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this flex agreement is really to make it as easy on the local sponsors to apply for the carbon reduction program as possible. If you or the sponsor has already applied previously to the carbon reduction program, here's what we need you to do so we can reutilize your application and not make you go through the whole application process again. So the important things to note on this page, this is the entire form for the flex agreement. The boxes that you see on the right-hand side of the screen are probably the most important things to note here. Under this new program, as Tim previously mentioned, these are the eligible project categories. If your project that you previously applied for does not fit these categories, then unfortunately is no longer applicable to the 2023 carbon reduction program. So the advanced transportation and congestion management technologies section, the replacement of street lighting and traffic control devices, and right-of-way projects that improve traffic flow. So if it doesn't fit any of these three boxes, unfortunately, it is not going to be eligible for the flex agreement or for the carbon reduction program. If it does fit these three boxes, then please fill out this form and resubmit it to WisDOT Central Office, and we'll be able to reutilize your application from 2022. Next slide, please. So I'm going to get into accessing the application materials. For new sponsors that didn't previously apply in 2022, this will be what we need to get done by the application deadline in order to apply for the carbon reduction program for 2023. Next slide, please. So the very basic level here, accessing the wisconsin.dot.gov webpage. On the DOT webpage is a search bar. In the search bar, you can simply type in carbon. The first search result that comes up on your page will be for the WisDOT Carbon Reduction Program. Upon seeing that, please click on it and access the website. Next slide, please. As far as accessing the application materials, from that webpage, you'll be taken to the carbon reduction page where all of the materials are provided. So here we have the carbon reduction application, the instructions, the flex agreement, and some other useful information. Next slide, please. So getting into the application instructions we have here, on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see all of the basic information for contact points and application submission. Again, the whole purpose of these application instructions is to make it as simple as possible for the locals to submit an application for the CRP program and have it be successful. On the right-hand side, right up top, you see the most important information The applications are due Friday, April 7th, 2023, no later than 5 p.m. Again, this is a very significant portion, so you will be hearing about that repeatedly in this presentation, but Friday, April 7th by 5 p.m. Are when applications are due. Following down the sheet on the right-hand side, you can see all the breakdowns of what everything means. We're really trying to make this accessible and easy to fill out, so this kind of provides you necessary information for understanding the application, which we'll get to here on the next slide. Next slide, please. So here's the opening of the application, and I think it's helpful to break this down. All of these sections are very important to understand and interpret before you're filling it out. So obviously the sponsor name, and following that the sponsor type. For these programs, there's a pretty wide availability, but if you're a state, if you're a county, a city, a village, a town, or a tribal nation, you're all eligible to apply under the carbon reduction program. So whichever box is appropriate, please click there to complete that section. And as we work our way down the list, project title, the location, boundaries, length of the project, the county, and the street address of the project. Next slide, please. And this has been discussed previously in this presentation, but the eligible project activities are very, very important in your application, whether that's from the Flex agreement or as part of a new application. So again, there are 3 eligible categories under the WisDOT CRP 2023 program cycle. The first being advanced transportation and congestion management technologies, for example, advanced traveler information systems, collision avoidance technologies, deployment of infrastructure-based intelligent transportation systems, capital improvements, and installation of vehicle to infrastructure communication systems. Secondly, replacement of street lighting and traffic control devices with energy efficient alternatives. And lastly, right-of-way projects that improve traffic flow that does not result in construction of new capacity. Under this, as Tim previously stated, this is all set out by the Wisconsin State Legislature. And if you have any questions regarding what these all entail, please reach out. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to pass this off to Meryl Meckler-Hickson, our section chief here in WisDOT Local Programs, to take you through some helpful information for applying for the carbon reduction program.
Thank you, Chris. Now, at this point, for those of you who may be new to the WisDOT Local Programs application process, and maybe as a bit of a reminder for some more experienced individuals, we just wanted to take a step back and just go over some generalized basic tips that potentially you can keep in mind that'll help you to create a successful local programs application. I wanted to walk through really the process for writing a good application for the carbon reduction program, or really any grant, from start to finish. First, you'll need to do some legwork and some preparation related to your project. The first thing to do when a grant application period announcement comes out, and this may seem obvious, but you'll want to take a thorough look at the supporting documentation that's published by the grant issuing agency, in this case, the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. This is usually the program guidelines document, but in some supplemental project solicitations, there may be additional guidance. Study the relevant documents to make sure that you're eligible to apply and to be competitive. Gauging eligibility is generally pretty cut and dry. For WisDOT programs, there is usually a defined list of eligibility for sponsors. For carbon reduction, the list of eligible sponsors is provided on the first page of the application form. Gauging competitiveness can be a bit tougher, but generally in our WisDOT programs, looking at the selection or evaluation criteria within the application materials can give you some clues as to what you need to know about competitiveness. For carbon reduction, you will want to highlight how a demonstrated reduction in emissions will result from your project. After you've looked at supporting documentation for eligibility and competitiveness, then you can start tailoring your project and your application to the specific program. You'll want to develop a clear definition of both the project scope and the project need, and you can also begin to conduct stakeholder outreach. Generally, engaging the community is a good idea, especially engaging those who would be directly affected by the project. You can request a letter of support if that's something that's allowed in the program that you're applying for. Sometimes you can include those in the grant application itself, or you can pull excerpts into your application narrative or project summary to make your application more compelling. If you are requesting a letter of support, please make sure that you do so early. And also remember that you can always provide your writer with an example of a past letter so that they have a little bit better idea of what to write. Now we'll move on to some actions that should be taken during the application process. You'll definitely want to make sure that you complete all sections of the application materials. An incomplete application may not be considered. In applications that I've personally reviewed, the materials that are most commonly omitted include maps of project areas, breakdowns of eligible costs, and photos of the project area. Please remember, a picture is definitely worth 1,000 words. Don't miss the chance to include a photo if you're allowed to. For our WisDOT programs, a location map is generally required with each application. And one really great way to clearly highlight project area on a map is to use the WisDOT tool called Whistler, or the Wisconsin Information System for Local Roads, which has interactive mapping functionality. This is really helpful for demonstrating the precise termini of a project in one map, which is what our WisDOT programs require. Whistler also allows local governments to access information related to local roads, such as width, surface type, pavement condition rating, etc. Another must when writing your application, review your application materials for errors. Look for common errors like word swaps or misplaced punctuation. It can be helpful to read through the grant aloud to yourself and also to have an outside reviewer who may be unfamiliar with the project take a look at it. This is independent verification that the grant is clear to those without a lot of inside knowledge of the project. And really, I think that feeds into a larger point about the need really to write concisely and clearly. Some of the best applications employ the less is more strategy and keep their materials concise, specific, and clear. Many of our WisDOT programs, like carbon reduction, include an application narrative or project summary section. This is your critical opportunity to include additional information about the scope and benefits of your project. You can really think of it as your opportunity to speak directly to the discretionary selection committee, if there is one for the program, like there is going to be for carbon reduction, and make sure that you write to the evaluation criteria. Again, for carbon reduction, you will want to describe how a demonstrated reduction in emissions will result from your project, as that is the main goal of the program. This is the information that the committee will need in order to make their decision. And writing style absolutely matters here. I hear from the selection committees that the best applications really sell the project by speaking directly to the evaluation criteria and engaging the reviewer with compelling information. Successful applications make it easy for the committee to think, this is a great project, it's worthy of funding in the program. After your application is complete, I think it's also helpful to read through it just one more time with the evaluation criteria in mind. Again, this is how the committee of reviewers are going to score the application, and reading it like a committee member can give you a lot of insight as to whether you're hitting the marks that you intended to while you were writing it. Finally, know the application deadline. Submit your applications by that deadline. For this carbon reduction program solicitation, the deadline again is Friday, April 7th at 5:00 p.m. Be sure to note the time of day that the application is due and submit it well in advance of the deadline in case you have any technology issues, if at all possible. Also, check your attachments before you send off the final version of your application. Then after submitting an application, a good applicant really has three traits. They're proactive, they're patient, and they're persistent. I recommend that you confirm receipt of application materials just in case there was an error in transmission. Also, if something changes with your project. For example, if an event occurs that requires some sort of a scope change, please update the department as soon as possible. For programs that do not have a publicized award announcement date, it can be helpful to ask when project awards are likely to be announced. For this solicitation, it is likely that project awards will be announced in May of 2023. Additionally, in the waiting period between application and award announcement, Do not start construction or design work on your project if that work is included in your pending application. Projects with WisDOT funding are not authorized to incur costs until the contract between the state and the municipality, also known as the State Municipal Agreement, or SMA, is signed by both parties. Finally, be persistent. Not all applications are successful the first time they come in, and these are often in very competitive programs. If you aren't awarded initially, don't think of it as wasted time and effort. Your initial investment has essentially made you better positioned to be able to apply for project funding in the future. And with all of the historic funding opportunities that are happening right now, really that's a great position to be in. So in conclusion, we just want to share a few additional resources that may be helpful as you fill out your carbon reduction applications. Now, over the past few weeks, we have had a few common questions that have come into the main local programs inbox, some of which we would like to address today. First, and this is an important point because it is a big change from the 2022 solicitation, are zero emission electric construction vehicle purchases eligible for the current 2023 solicitation? And the answer to that is no. Due to the restrictions on the 2023 federal expenditure plan, zero emission electric construction vehicle purchases are not eligible for the current 2023 solicitation. However, project eligibility may change in future carbon reduction program solicitations, so please stay tuned for additional CRP solicitation announcements that will be coming later this year. Second, is this current solicitation for the entirety of the BIL funding period, which runs through 2026, or is it for state fiscal year 2023 only? That's a great question, and we do want to be clear. The answer is that this solicitation is only for 2023. We do anticipate releasing another carbon reduction program solicitation for projects that will be scheduled in 2024 through 2028 later this year. So please, again, stay tuned for future program announcements. And lastly, are construction projects eligible for the current solicitation? The answer is yes. However, keep in mind for 2023, the only eligible construction projects would be for things like traffic signalization, replacement of street lighting, and right-of-way projects that improve traffic flow but do not result in the construction of new capacity, so things like turn lanes. And also, please keep in mind, all construction projects for 2023 must be fully designed already and be able to meet an August 1st plan specifications and estimates, or PS&E deadline, and be able to be obligated in fiscal year 2023. If your construction project does not meet that description, you'll want to hold on to your application for a future CRP solicitation. Now, on this slide are the main WisDOT central office contacts for the carbon reduction program, all of whom participated in today's presentation. In the upper left, we have the contact information for statewide carbon reduction program manager and main BIL point of contact, Chris Brooks. Below him is the contact information for local program supervisor, Tim Alushigan, and my contact information is provided in the upper right. Please feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any additional questions about the carbon reduction program. Now, in WisDOT Central Office, our main focus really is on administration and scheduling. For more delivery-specific questions, we also have dedicated regional local program managers who are stationed in your specific areas. Some of these are individuals that you may have interacted with in the past, but we do have a couple of new faces. Up in the North Central region, we have Ben Rostkowski. In the Northwest region, Randy Kirk. One of the new faces in the Southwest region, Rob Winterton. In the Northeast region, Kelsey Lorenz is handling the carbon reduction program. And in the Southeast region, you can speak to Jake Varnes. If you have any delivery questions regarding really any of our local programs, the individuals on this slide are a great resource to reach out to first, and at the very least can generally steer you to the right person to address your specific project delivery questions. Now on this slide, we have links to the department's Bipartisan Infrastructure Law webpage, a helpful link to a list of common local programs, acronyms, and definitions, as well as a link to a series of helpful local program project development process training videos that are not specific to the carbon reduction program, but they do provide a good general introduction to the requirements surrounding federally funded local programs. I know these are long links. You don't necessarily need to rush to write these down. We will be making a copy of this slideshow available on the WisDOT website for the carbon reduction program. And with that, on behalf of the entire carbon reduction team here at WisDOT, I do want to thank you for your participation in today's informational webinar. The email address that's displayed on the screen, dot.localprograms@dot.wi.gov, is our main local programs email address. Please feel free to send your questions about carbon reduction or questions about any of our local programs directly to this inbox. So once again, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.